And this complete fest has been organized by Walter E. Dandy in sponsorship with Walter Kluwer's publication, All India Book
I should be the
House.
one.
Yeah. So I welcome you, sir, and it's really my privilege to be on board with you. And just to share with all that Dr. Deepak Agarwal is a professor neurosurgery in Gamma Knife. He has more than 10 patents in technology fields, including. I would request all the participants to please mute themselves. Yeah. So he has more than 10 patents in technology fields, including ventilator designs, insulin pump, electronic mask, non-invasive blood sugar measurements using HRV, etc. He's a co-inventor of world's cheapest ICU ventilator, world's cheapest insulin pump, world's first electronic mask with real-time virus deactivation and monitoring of in-mask AQI and other gases. He's been the course director in ultrasound trauma course. He's ATLS instructor and received 50 awards, including Neurosurgeon of the Year 2008 award by the Congress of Neurological Surgeons USA. He has more than 200 publications in the international peer-reviewed journals. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce you, sir, today. And today the topic that sir will be taking is innovation in neurosurgery. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ishita. And I thank Bhavya and all the organizers of this conference for inviting me over. And I think it is very important that undergraduates such as yourself get a glimpse into what is there in the real world. You know, we are living and while we are in the college in a different kind of a league. And when we go out into the real world, actually practicing and doing treating patients, it is something very, very different. So I will tell you about my own philosophy as well as how I have managed over the last 25 odd years since I finished my MBBS. So I'm going to share my presentation. Just a minute. So I hope you can all see my presentation.
Yes, sir.
So this is about innovations and neurosurgery and how it is a mind game. So when I say a mind game, we are actually playing with the mind inside regarding how to achieve happiness, how to achieve satisfaction and be more creative. And you know, our thinking is actually based on our upbringing, what our parents and our people around us have made us into a kind of a rigid thinking person. And when we move out into the world, into the university, colleges, and actually into the hospitals, we are forced to think a little differently out of the box. And this creates a dichotomy. So the decision making, which we are doing all the time, right from personal decisions to patient decisions, it becomes very stressful sometimes. And here I will talk about a philosophical or an ethical concept known as a utilitarianism. This is an ethical theory that holds that the proper course of action is one that maximizes overall happiness. And it is also described as the greatest happiness principle. So there are two types of this utilitarianism. One is the act utilitarianism, which says that one is faced with a choice. We must first consider the likely consequences of that potential action and to choose what we believe generates the most pleasure, or in case of a patient, the least risk. So when we're advising a treatment or a management or doing anything, we have to balance the risk with the benefits. And this is individual based. And if we correlate it with the individual things, then every single patient, if we are doing by this act, should get the best possible treatment. In other words, everybody should be living and eating in a 5-star comfort. But this doesn't happen. What actually happens is the other part of this rule, which is known as the rule utilitarian. To determine whether a rule should be followed, one looks at what would happen if it was constantly followed. That means for all of us. And this is where the concept of the greatest good for the greatest number comes in. Now again, because we have a dichotomy in management, everybody wants the best treatment. However, similar to having a top-end car, however, the ground reality is that the vast majority of us are living in sub-perfect conditions, unsafe conditions. So now how do we kind of reconcile ourselves to providing a level of care which is balanced in terms of the cost effectiveness as well as the quality of care? This is one of the biggest enigmas or the problems we face every day. And before I really come on to the innovations which are the key to balance this, I will talk about a small example of the first kidney transplant in AIIMS, New Delhi. I don't know how many of you know, but the first kidney transplant happened in 1980s in AIIMS. This was not the first transplant in India, but it was the first in AIIMS and in a government institution. And that's why, there were congratulatory messages from the president, from the prime minister, and the whole nephrology department was, very happy because the transplant was a huge success. The patient was fine. And because this was the first transplant patient, he was treated like a VIP. So they had monthly checkups and everything. Now what happened was 1 year down the line, the patient suddenly died. So everybody was very surprised because things were going very well. And the doctors actually requested the family members for an autopsy to find out what had happened. And the wish was granted and they did an autopsy and they found that the transplanted kidney was absolutely fine. There was no transplant rejection and everything seemed okay. You know what was the cause of the death? The cause of death in this patient was starvation. Because he spent his last paisa on buying immunosuppressive drugs, which were extremely expensive at that time. So the take-home message is, we might be capable of doing the best, but is the best really going to help that person? If he doesn't have money, if we don't have a system in place to really provide everything, just doing a renal transplant and not taking care of the medication is not going to serve the patient or the family or the society. So after that, there was a change in the thinking and a whole system was developed for renal transplantation. So the take-home message are many in this, but what I want to say is that whatever we do, we should be doing taking a holistic view rather than just running after, things which may be incredibly expensive, but not really proving cost effective for the people around us. And I can tell you that we are not learning from our mistakes. We have been, India has now almost 70 years plus since independence. Despite that, we do not have an indigenous MRI. It is so sad. They are still making it. It's not out for any commercial production. We don't even have an indigenous CT. What to say we don't have an indigenous ultrasound machine? And I don't know if you will believe it or not, but even central lines are imported till date. You look in your own wards and your own centers and you'll find everything from central line is BBRON, ultrasound, CT, MRI machines, all are imported. There is not a single Indian manufacturer, and the government has not put in time and effort to make sure that, okay, over 5 years, over 10 years, like they made a nuclear submarine, but they could not make us an ultrasound machine because the priorities are wrapped. And when somebody actually makes something like an infusion pump, which are available made in India, the cost is same or more than the imported Chinese ones. So they lose whatever competitive advantage they could have gained. See, the other industries have taken up. Tata made this car, which really revolutionized, although it was not a success, but it showed that we could make cost-effective technologies in India, which could help the masses, could provide a safer means of transport from the last photograph which I showed, and really help the society. So now I'll be sharing my journey in my innovations and what I felt could help my patients. So, each one of us has the capability to help the people around them. It is how further do we step out of our comfort zones to help them. And I'll give you a few examples. So we have what is known as the image guidance or the neuro navigation system in every good neurosurgery department, which is basically a GPS navigation for navigating inside the brain. Previously, it was extremely expensive, costing crores. Now also it costs 1 or 2 crores. And although there is a one-time purchase, which is the equipment, there was also a cost of disposables previously, which used to cost us around $100, which is in today's terms around 7,000 to 8,000 rupees per patient. And it involved putting in sticking fiducials on the patient's head so that they could register with the system. Now, for the vendors, it was a very good game because obviously once they sell the machine, then they keep making the money on the disposables and it keeps getting them good profits. However, for us working in government hospitals, it's a big problem. It's difficult to ensure smooth supply of disposables, as we all know. Plus, there are always departmental politics. People don't want others to use the same equipment, or they want everything to be hoarded. There are so many issues in that. And it happened in our case also. So I was very good in this, using this neuro navigation system. And I used to use it in every patient. So what people did was they stopped the supply of disposables so that the machine could not be used. Rather than being disheartened, there are various options you can do. And I would urge each one of you, if you have not read this book, please go through it. It is Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. And it has been one of the best sellers across the world. And it consists of 4 characters. You can see the snip, scurry, hem, and haw. And it shows you, or it tells you philosophically, that if the situation changes, don't get disheartened or give up. It's like saying that if one door closes, 100 will open up, something like that. And so similarly, I started thinking that how I could, innovate or do something which can still make the machine work. So I started experimenting with various substances which could be substituted for those fiducials. And finally, I zeroed in on vitamin E capsules. Here you see the vitamin E capsules, the translucent one, because of the tocopherol inside them. Now, the beauty of this tocopherol or the vitamin E is that it is the only substance, as far as I could find out, which lights up brilliantly in an MRI also, plain MRI, in a CT scan also. And so it is very nicely visible in both the modalities. So it becomes an excellent fiducial for neuronavigation. And obviously the cost is nothing. It's hardly 10 to 50 rupees for the 6 capsules which are required to be put on the head. And see, when we can see the capsules, we can use it. And suddenly the machine was up and running and the cost came down from $100 to 10 rupees, which is a huge thing. And at that time, this was around 10 years back. We actually made a paper out of it. It was published in the Red Journal, the Neurosurgery. And this innovation actually, was so well appreciated by the international community, but that the CNS jury were highly impressed at that time. And they even awarded me for this award, for this category. The next thing which I started working again based on my patients was the ventilator. There were so many patients coming as a neurosurgeon. one of the most important things is maintaining respiration. That is ensuring the patient does not have hypoxemia or hypercarbia. Two are the most important things, the killers of neurosurgical patients. And ventilation is extremely important. So most of the neurotrauma patients, including head and spinal injuries, require ventilation for the time till they recover and can manage on their own. However, the ground reality is extremely depressing. You know, this was an article, it's the same article can be published today also, it will give the same statistics. And it showed that Delhi, which is a central, which is the most well-funded state in India, having the second highest GDP, has actually very poor quality hospital infrastructure. Ideally, 20 to 30% of all hospital beds should be ICU beds, like a ventilator bed. And if you look at two centrally funded hospitals, which are Safdarjung Hospital, they have just 4%. Loknaik Jayaprakash Hospital, just 2%. And other hospitals will be even worse. So you can see the sorry state. Most of the patients, this is a common thing seen in major hospitals where the relatives are actually using ambu bag to ventilate the patient. And the most important reason why this was happening, because ventilators were extremely expensive. They were costing around 10 to 20 lakhs per piece and had high cost of disposables and not very user friendly. So they required very specialized manpower and support staff. So when I started thinking about it, there was obviously a lot of angst in the community around me. They said, why are you as a neurosurgeon making a ventilator? Anesthetists were quite angry or irritated. But I didn't think, because see, anybody could have made one in the last 100, nobody did. And as Lady Gaga says, that if at least half the people don't dislike your work, you have done it wrong. So you should do what you like. And coming back from Who Moved My Cheese, there's a partner I selected from the technology side. We developed a full-fledged advanced ventilator, which could be used both at home, in the ward, or in the ICU. And we made it from the ground up. So using technology, which was quite innovative. For example, using an Android tablet as the screen so that it could run off an app. So the total cost of ownership was just rupees 50,000, which is nothing compared to a traditional ventilator. And this was, this came as front page news in all newspapers, media, and everything. However, news is one part. Vision without action is hallucination. And we do a cut to 2021. Now this company, which was formed to manufacture this, is now become one of the largest ventilator manufacturers in India. Just in 3 years. And we have managed to sell more than 13,000 ventilators in 2020 alone. Obviously, the COVID pandemic helped. But even before that, we were selling close to 1,000 ventilators a year. So constantly doing something, imagining and doing what you really want to do. That's what my aim is to tell you all, will achieve results down the line. And the biggest satisfaction comes from seeing patients you have helped. There were 6 patients in a cubicle in our ward, which were ventilator dependent, and we could not send home because they were ventilator dependent for periods ranging from 2 to 5 years, with an average of 3 years. And we could discharge 4 of these patients on AGVA ventilator. And they're now at home. Now it's been almost 1 year for this patient. And you can imagine how good it is for the family to be back home with the patient. Then every way you can be helping people around you. And this ventilator is being used on very small children, right up to adult patients for transport, as well as this is not the patient we discharged from. the last thing which I want to talk about innovation is big data. We all hear about this buzzword, big data, big data, big data, and we think that we cannot do anything about it because it involves a lot of AI in medical imaging and diagnosis or clinical decision support system. But it depends on you. When I was made in charge of the IT and computerization at All India Institute of Medical Sciences some few years back, and at that time I realized how big the potential was to generate good quality data and to use it for the benefit of patients. AIMS is a big hospital. We have around 3,000 beds and more than 3,000 crores of annual budget. The employees, the permanent employees are more than 13,000 at what you can imagine a single location, and more than 5,000 contractual employees. So almost 20,000 people are working in AIMS. So it's a big number. And if you see the numbers of patients we are treating, it are mind-boggling. We have more than 1 million lab investigations, 3 million OPD patients, 150,000 surgeries. So you can imagine the amount of data generated waiting to be tapped. However, nobody is doing it because everybody is busy in their own job. Add to this, every patient comes with a couple of attendants. So if you have 3 million, at least 6 million attendants are coming. Those are also being completely left out. And we have a lot of people collecting data. However, it is important that we correctly identify the problem and then work on it. So the first study was, because we were getting, our OPD were obviously, totally saturated. We had more than 200 different OPDs, different kind of OPDs, and multiple doctors per room. It's like a typical government hospital, 10,000 patients a day. So we decided, how do we manage it? And we made a completely free unified appointment system across all OPDs, and a predictive model, so that we could actually book 100%, 200%, 300% of the patients which were supposed to come on the specific day, to cater to the no-shows. And if you look at this for a medicine department, we could come up with a 90% accuracy for every single day in the year. That today, because of whatever reason, we had overlays of weather, we had overlays of holidays and everything, we could predict that how many patients are going to be coming to a specific OPD on a specific day. The other case study which we did was on infection control. Again, because our labs are online, our duty rotas are online, our drugs are online. So we combined all this, we made the data come to a single point, and we made an automated infection surveillance system. We have an infection control committee, we have everything, but they do everything manually. So we decided on our own to have an automated infection control system, and we were getting, because the nurses were entering the vitals of every patient at least once in their shift. So we were getting, immediately we started getting 3 million data points on body temperature itself in a year. So the system could find out which patients had fever, were they getting antibiotics, were their cultures coming positive, and were the lines or catheters getting infected. And we could see on the dashboard, how many cultures was being processed, how many were positive, and if they were positive, how many were hospital-acquired infection. And then, drill down to the department and the ward. And more importantly, we could actually have a map of every ward or every floor and see which beds were getting infected over time on a temporal, time plot. And then overlay the duty rota of the nurses, which was also electronic, and the hospital staff, and seeing that whether any nurse or a hospital staff or a doctor who was caring for the patients were leading to more infection, like, typhoid Mary. So this kind of a data overlay, automatic, could lead us to clues as to which were the high risk areas, which were the high risk staff, and then take corrective action proactively. So this is going on a completely different level. I'm just trying to tell you that innovation has no boundaries, no limits. And I would like to conclude that it's not important to innovate. It's not important. It's important to be happy and to be, I would say, satisfied with yourself. You do not have to compete with everybody in the world. You just have to be you. The world will adjust. So thank you so much for taking time out for this, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
I request all the participants to type in the chat box any questions they have.
So that was indeed like one of the, I would say, American moments for me, because, I haven't seen any Indian who's doing so much of effort to do so much of good, and that too cost effective technology in a country like India. And I'm like actually so proud that I am from the same alumnus as yours. And I actually used to think that, there are no more people in UC who could do stuff like this, which I wanted to do. But looking at you now, I just feel like so inspired and so happy. And I'm like really, really honored to actually know you in person. So thank you so much, sir, for that.
Thank you, Bhavya. This was just to, show that there is a potential in every one of us, depending on our interest and passion. So I think each one of us has that. Sometimes, people get so busy with their routine stuff that they don't get time to do anything else. So I'm seeing few chats. Can you just
Yes, sir. Sir, Vignesh want to ask, sir, how do you differentiate a hospital-acquired infection just by the data available on screen?
Excellent. That's an excellent question, Vignesh. See, one of the biggest problems is identifying hospital-acquired infection from the culture reports. So if any culture report comes, most of the tracheal cultures are positive, but they don't mean anything because they are from contaminants, because it's there in the air itself. So if we have a patient, number one, who's having fever and who's got an infection, we usually culture positive, we usually think it is because of that. Now, if we have 3 or 4 patients having the same strain and in the same vicinity, let's say in the same cubicle, we can definitely say that this is a hospital-acquired infection because it has transmitted from one patient to the other patient to the third patient. And now if we zoom in and look at the screen or the dashboard and look at the ward and see each bed, which bacteria is growing, whether the bacterial is the same, which is growing across 2 or 3 patients, then we can, with a reasonable surety say that this is a hospital-acquired infection, which is spreading through healthcare workers or by, cross spread, which we need to deal with.
I hope this answers your question, Vignesh, sorry. And any more questions from the audience? I see there are none. You can ask. Okay, so Mustafa is asking, being from a medical background, how do we know the potential of a technology or AI?
See, you don't have to have any background actually to know the potential. It is on, if I am a doctor, I would definitely like to see potential of technology in the stuff which I'm using every day. Similarly, as an engineer, whatever equipment you use, you like to see a potential for AI in using that. So I would say any person in medical background, if you're using imaging, if you're using data, if you're using any patient source, you can use AI to further improve the quality. I just given you a few examples in big data itself. There is no limits on the thinking. That is as I put in a slide saying that the mind is a brilliant thing. It can be used as either way, to do bad things also and to do brilliant things also. So it all wholly depends on, your thinking. So we have one question from Rimi. Sorry, Rimi.
Yes, sir. Sorry, she's saying, what are the measures taken then after you got to know hospital-acquired infection?
See, you can do a lot of things, starting from identifying the source. You know, the hospital-acquired, if there's it's an infection which is going across, the first thing which I would do is isolate the patients, fumigate the cubicle, then find out where, if it's the one patient source, I will make sure that there is nobody. I will isolate that patient, and I will make sure that the healthcare workers are further sensitized so that they take more precautions while touching the patient and touching all the patients in the cubicle or in that ward. And finally, if I have the duty rota overlay and other overlays on the system, I will try and find out, is there a person like the typhoid Mary who is actually touching, and it could be a nurse, it could be a healthcare worker, it could be, right down to the person who empties the urine bags. So if we can find there, we can actually stop it.
So next question is by Yash Modi. He's saying, AI is surely much helpful for smooth running of healthcare system, but doesn't it reduce the learning process for interns or budding doctors, also who is still in a learning process in their career?
Yes, I think that, learning is basically up to you. There is nobody can stop you from learning. The only thing which stops you is your own mind. And there could be a huge amount of technology around us, but we are the ones who are supposed to, understand the principles behind them and what we are doing every day. I feel that AI has absolutely no role in or a conflict with the learning. It is a complementary thing. It actually, as an intern, allows you to see the potential of a technology which is there. So if you have AI in a hospital where you're doing an internship, I think it is extremely good, because then you can see how people are using that to improve the quality of care and patient outcomes.
Surely, sir. And I would say that, like, it's in my belief that in a century where this is a century of innovation, so it's been really amazing to listen you on this topic. And I think this is a topic everybody would be craving for to listen. And there are so many things that I myself learned today. And it is kind of an awareness session and a motivation session for me that I can approach for such more innovations in future. Yeah. Any more questions from the audience we can have in another 2 minutes?
So thank you, Ishika. Thank you, Bhavya, and all the other organizers for having me here. It was a pleasure, talking to you and sharing my experience with all of you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's basically my honor to be here with you and moderating this session and just talking to you this way. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye-bye.
And I request all the participants not to leave the meeting, because we have a post-event questionnaire for all of you to fill in up, which will validate your entry as an active delegate here, and will make you eligible for the certificate. So I think one of my teammates has shared the form. Everyone's supposed to fill that form, and soon after at 2:30 p.m. we will be renewing. You have a little lunch break till then for 1.5 hours, and we will be starting shortly with another of our talks with Dr. Suchanda, who is the director professor for neurosurgery and one of the best female neurosurgeons of all time in the world, having international publications. Right at 2:30 p.m. I repeat, 2:30 p.m. See you soon, everybody.